I started doing all the fretwork first because it's a fairly self-contained task which doesn't require any woodworking. All the luthiers I've been following up until now use a notched straight edge for making sure the neck is perfectly straight before doing any kind of leveling. My neck was already fairly straight, so I could have skipped this step, but I wanted to do it properly, so I decided to sacrifice one side of an aluminium ruler for this purpose. The process was relatively simple. I just marked the fret positions on the ruler and created narrow slots using a triangular file. After all this was done, I made another pass with a rounded file to enlarge all slots, and then finally I wrapped the same file in fine sandpaper to remove any hard edges. The slots are roughly 6 mm long and 2 mm deep. I tried using the ruler on a few other guitars, and it works well with a Strat neck and probably a Telecaster too, but unfortunately it doesn't fit a Les Paul because the scale length is just too short. So if I ever want to do fret leveling on shorter scale guitars, I will have to build another one. I ended up making slight adjustments to the truss rod because there was a slight back bow on the neck. Then I moved on to the fret leveling process. I don't have a proper leveling beam, but my IKEA coffee table has the perfectly shaped legs for this. Exactly the right length and width, and flat on one side. I taped a strip of 400 grit sandpaper on the flat side and marked all frets with a black marker. Because they all have slightly different heights, the leveling beam will progressively sand down the highest frets and strip away the marker until all of them are at the same level. I reapplied the marker a couple of times and sanded until no more markings remained. This process introduces another problem in the form of destroying the fret shapes. You can see in this picture that in some places a lot of material was sanded off, resulting in very flat frets. When this happens, the contact point between the string and the fret moves slightly closer to the bridge and messes up the intonation. The solution is to recrown the frets. The first step is to cover everything with masking tape, exposing only the frets. This helps protect the wood from any accidents. You have to file the sides of each fret and reduce the flat strip to be as narrow as possible and right in the middle of the fret. There are special crowning files which make life easier, but I use the regular one instead. It can be difficult to see exactly how much you're filing away, but I learned a good trick to make this easier. You can mark the frets again using a marker and always make sure to leave the middle strip untouched. This should maintain the same fret level along the neck while restoring the proper rounded shape of the frets. It took a bit of practice to get the hang of it, because it's the first time that I'm working on something like this, but it became much easier after that. Once I was happy with the result, I used a straight piece of plastic to check all frets for minor defects. You can use any straight surface that covers exactly 3 frets. The idea is to see if there's any spot where the straight surface rocks back and forth. If that happens, the middle fret is higher than the adjacent ones. Luckily this wasn't the case, so I moved on to polishing. For this I used a piece of 400 grit sandpaper to get rid of any hard scratches from filing. I tried to focus on the sides of each fret instead of the top, because I didn't want to take any more material off. Then I made a few passes with 1000 grit sandpaper and finally moved on to fine steel wool. This restored the metallic shine, and you can really see the difference in this picture. The 2 frets on the left were polished with steel wool, whereas the 2 frets on the right were only sanded with 1000 grit sandpaper. There's a special polishing cloth called Gorgamite for even better results, I might use it at a later point in time, but so far I'm happy with how this turned out. The whole process took me roughly 4 hours. I didn't have to file the fret ends because they were already smooth enough, so that probably saved me a couple of hours of work. As far as I know, investing more time in the fretwork is usually worth it, because this is the kind of work where more time translates directly into a better playing experience. I still have to mount the headstock replacement piece and finish the wood properly, but this is enough for now.